My work centers around the application of natural language processing techniques to literary historical datasets from a methodological point of view. So both natural language processing and the humanities are highly text-centered, meaning that text is at the center of their praxis. So you would think that the application of NLP to literary historical text material would be quite a smooth process. But treating literary historical texts as datasets to process does come with quite a few of unique challenges related to diverging theoretical perspectives, core practices, and the subjective nature of literary historical texts. In this video, we will go a bit deeper into the challenges that arise when we apply NLP to literary historical datasets. So, first of all, a couple of definitions. Natural language processing, or NLP, is a field on the crossroads of computer science, AI, and linguistics, which focuses on teaching computers how to process natural language. The humanities, then, of course, is an umbrella term to refer to the study of history, the arts, and literature. In digital humanities or computational literary studies, we apply a wide range of digital approaches to analyze historical artifacts or data. What digital humanities is or isn't is a very prolific discussion, which we will not get into in detail right now, but usually hermeneutic practices from the humanities are combined with digital methodologies. And in the case of natural language processing, it would help us to analyze and extract information from historical text data. The NLP landscape is quite vast, so there are a lot of methodologies out there. An example of unsupervised NLP methodologies often used in digital humanities, so meaning algorithms which are not trained on labeled data, is clustering, for example, a methodology used for topic modeling to uncover the overarching themes in large historical text corpora. On the other hand, supervised approaches, so meaning algorithms which are trained using labeled datasets, are used for classification and information extraction. Think about tasks such as named entity recognition or relation extraction, which are super useful in the creation of historical networks, for example, entity linking and semantic indexing. A task such as sentiment analysis also happens in digital humanities, which is the task of classifying text according to a valence score, so a positive or negative, for example, could be used to create sentiment arcs or, for example, to analyze how books were received by the public. So let's get into some practical impediments which makes the application of NLP in DH so damn challenging. So first of all, an obvious reason is the presence of historical languages. Most off-the-shelf tools in modern NLP are trained on modern languages and, of course, do not generalize well to the historical domain. Usually, to train a discriminative AI system, so say a named entity recognition system, for example, we need a lot of annotated data. And in literary historical settings, this data is often not available. This could be, for example, because the data is not digitized yet, given that a lot of historical texts are still residing in analog archives and are thus not born digital. If the texts are digitized, they go through a process of optical character recognition, or OCR for short. However, here we kind of run into a chicken or egg problem. We need good OCR models to recognize text, so whether it is handwritten or not, but to train these models, we need a lot of annotated data, which for smaller case studies is often not available. If the texts are full of weird symbols and nonsensical words because of this digitization process, this trickles down to the results of any discriminative model that we may want to train, because OCR errors are known to have a detrimental effect on the results of information extraction models, for example. Even in the ideal situation where we have annotated data available, DH curricula usually do teach the basics of programming, but they often do not go deep into natural language processing. So DH scholars often don't have the technical know-how to start modeling. Of course, one can assume the challenging Da Vincian role of the Renaissance person who is both highly proficient in NLP and hermeneutic practice, or goals can be reached through cross-disciplinarity, where experts in NLP and the humanities put their heads together. In theory, of course, this makes sense, but in practice, communicating needs and expectations is often quite a challenge. Next to this digitization and communication gap, the lack of large usable datasets is also due to the difficulty of annotating these texts. The end goals between modern NLP and NLP used in digital humanities also vary widely. Where modern NLP seeks to create and improve models which generalize well across a domain, DH scholars sometimes want to use these tools to answer literary historical research questions, which requires a more creative use of these tools. But if you think about it, its stylistic features, so think about metaphors or figures of speech, but also art forms such as poetry, interpreting literary historical texts becomes a very subjective and difficult matter. Writers have their own idiosyncratic writing styles, and on top of that, annotators' perspectives and interpretation of these texts will vary based on their own backgrounds and knowledge of the material. You can choose to annotate a text from a historical perspective, for example, so the way that we assume it was intended by the author based on expertise on the source text, or through a modern lens. This brings us to the benchmark problem in literary studies. The highly interpretable context makes it extraordinarily difficult to make it fit to the discriminative approaches in natural language processing, and consequently to create benchmark datasets to represent the literary domain. In modern NLP, annotation standards for, say, named entity recognition are usually available, and while they can be applied to NLP in DH, they usually do not cover the necessary ground. Say, for example, that we want to create annotations for a named entity recognition model to find animals in fairy tales. We would need to clearly delineate what an animal means to us. Do we include anthropomorphism, or do we then tag these entities as a person? This choice, of course, highly depends on the research goals. As we all know, with the advent of foundation large language models such as OpenAI's GPT, the NLP landscape is quickly changing, and this creates new opportunities but also new challenges for digital humanities as well. Popular systems in DH are still rule-based systems. We are always a bit slower to adopt some NLP techniques, and rule-based systems can still be super useful for us, for small case studies, for example, where high levels of expertise on the source material are useful. Discriminative systems are also quite popular, which learn a decision boundary based on training the models on a lot of annotated data. While these discriminative systems are often regarded as a safe method for its grounded evaluation practices and precision in classification tasks, discriminative systems are data hungry and do require a solid background in NLP to train them, which, as we discussed, can be quite a bottleneck in digital humanities. However, in comes generative AI. Generative AI learns the underlying distributions of data to generate new data instances. Despite the fact that they were not trained for this purpose, they are proven to be quite good at extracting information from texts across domains and languages. However, of course, prompting these models comes with their own challenges. They are known to produce hallucinations, propagate bias as they are trained on the internet, and as we know, the internet is anything but an unbiased space, and there are currently no standardized evaluation methods in place for prompting strategies. While it is known that the prompt structure, so changing a word, exerts a large influence on the output. Currently, at the time of speaking, there is also a true explosion of models, with new ones popping up every day and making evaluation of models a quickly fleeting process. However, these are very exciting times, as generative AI harbors the potential to change NLP practices in digital humanities. Because for the first time in history, we are able to talk to AI to make requests, which is a true paradigm shift and significantly could lower the thresholds for less tech-savvy DH scholars to start experimenting with NLP methodologies on their data. Thanks to zero-shot capabilities, these models can produce silver-labeled datasets without any or with very little training data, and they are known to be flexible across languages thanks to the vastness of the training data. So the question remains, where do we go from here? The main trends in NLP/DH research point towards gray box human-in-the-loop approaches. So the goal is never and will never be to replace the historian or the literary scholar. An AI system can help with data collection and analysis, but will never replace a humanities scholar's creativity or critical eye. Its main purpose should always be to use these AI systems as a tool to scale expert analysis to larger datasets. I have come to think about large language models and generative AI in the age as chainsaws. AI systems, they are becoming increasingly more accessible and easier to use. And much like a chainsaw, users, they do not need to know all of the ins and outs of an AI system to put it into practice. We don't need to know which saw blade that we need or how the chainsaw is constructed to cut through large chunks of data, but what we do need to know is the safety precautions that we need to take in order not to lose vital parts. We see this notion reflected in the rise of critical AI as a subfield of the age. Historians and literary scholars could reassess their role as, according to good habit of course, critical voices in the discussion regarding AI. And this is why it is important not to ignore this evolution, but to start experimenting with these new tools from the get-go. So firstly, to uncover the strong points and the weak spots of these AI systems, and secondly, to actively involve humanities scholars in the red-hot debate surrounding AI.